Motorsport, for the most part, can seem fairly predictable at times. You usually turn up to round one of any given championship every season, and there are bikes or cars that are generally quicker than the others. There are some that are slower, and the most unpredictability we get is usually throughout the midfield group, where the quality of the machines and teams and the pilots are at their most even. But MotoGP is different this year. In fact, it's been different for a few years. MotoGP is getting increasingly difficult to be able to predict a winner of any given race. For example, in 2020, our COVID interrupted year where we lost Marc Marquez, we had a reduced 14 race season that produced 9 separate race winners. In 2021, in the following year, we had 8 different race winners over the course of a season. And in just the opening 9 races of 2022 so far, we have 5 different race winners. And these days we can get sessions where the entire field will set times within 1.5 seconds of the leader, and the bike that sets the fastest time is the same bike that sets the slowest time. And all this has constantly got me asking myself, what actually is the worst bike in MotoGP? So I think the best way to start is to eliminate what we know isn't the worst bike in the field. And the obvious one here is the Ducati. The Desmo GP22 and the 21, evidently, is widely regarded by most as the best bike in the field. They accounted for 5 wins from the opening 9 races so far this season, and a high percentage of their riders are generally able to produce consistently good performances. So I certainly won't be arguing against the Bologna Bullet on this one. Seemingly the next best would be the Aprilia. Aleix Espargaro is the proof in the pudding that the perennial underachievers in MotoGP have found a little bit of that Italian moto magic shared by their cousins over at Ducati. Aleix has been able to produce consistent podium performances, along with a race win and a title challenge to boot. And while his teammate Maverick hasn't quite been at that level, he's at least been able to produce consistent point scoring performances, and he certainly isn't anchored to the bottom of the field, which sort of shows that this bike is at least rideable for more than just one guy. At this point, I think we can rule out Suzuki as well. They can produce good results pretty much anywhere, and while they're being let down a little bit at the moment by the form of their riders, we can probably put that down to a bit of the uncertainty surrounding their future. And look, Suzuki leaving anyway at the end of the season, aren't they? So like, not gonna waste my time talking about them. Fuck them. So that leaves us with just 3 manufacturers: KTM, Yamaha, and Honda. Yamaha's a funny one, with Quartararo giving them the Marc Marquez treatment this season and performing well above the quality of any of their other riders. It's hard to sort of gauge how bad or good this bike actually is. It was looking dire for Yamaha in the early rounds. Outside of Fabio's 2nd place finish in the wet at Indonesia, their best dry result was his 7th place finish at the Circuit of the Americas, and besides his consistent lower top 10 performances in those rounds, none of their other riders actually cracked the top 10 in the dry. Meanwhile, it was looking a little better for KTM and Honda. Both manufacturers had riders on the podium in Qatar through Brad Binder and Pol Espargaro respectively, with KTM even picking up a win in the wet in Indonesia. But as we headed to Portugal, round 5, it all started to come together for Fabio. He absolutely killed everybody in Portugal, finishing over 5 seconds ahead of Zarco, and since then he hasn't finished lower than 4th. He picked up 2 more podiums in Jerez and Mugello, and then as we saw in the last race, he absolutely destroyed the field to win very comfortably in Catalonia. And he's looking every bit at the moment like he's about to deliver Yamaha a 2nd consecutive world title, proving once and for all that Yamaha have designed a bike exclusively for use on European circuits. So you may be asking yourself right now, how can Yamaha have a 22-point lead in the World Championship, well on their way to a world title here, 2 in a row, and also be completely shit at the same time? Well, friends, let me direct you to the other end of the grid now, where Yamaha's other 3 riders have struggled to find themselves in the points with any kind of regularity at all. So bad is it at times for the other 3 Yamahas that in Le Mans, the last 3 bikes that finished the race and crossed the line were all Yamahas. And in Mugello, where Quartararo was the only points finisher out of the 4 Yamahas. I guess what I'm asking is, how do you decide what makes one bike worse than another? Do you judge the quality of the machine by its strongest results or by its weakest results? Or, like many things, is the answer somewhere in between? Honda have only once had one of their riders as the last man across the line, and that was at the Catalan Grand Prix in the last race, and Pole fell away in the final lap, so I don't know what happened, if they had a problem or anything like that. But generally for Honda, their slowest 3 riders are able to find themselves in the points with more regularity than that of Yamaha or KTM, which leaves me to think that Honda have maybe produced something more akin to the Aprilia, something very rideable, but they don't quite have someone on it that understands it the way that Aleix understands the RSGP. So basically it's completely meh, whilst not able to reach the agonizing lows that KTM and Yamaha seem to be capable of. So for something that should be an exercise in like fact and data, knowing what the least desirable bike for a MotoGP rider is, has become more of an exercise in expression of opinion. So what do you value more? A Yamaha that can win races with one rider but offers something well off the pace for every other rider? Or a Honda that can't crack a top 5 but most riders can produce consistent midfield results on it? I think for some people, the simple answer here is that the KTM is the worst bike. Other than the first 2 rounds of the season, they haven't really picked up any strong results, and their rookie partnership over at the Tech 3 or Tech 3 team more often than not find themselves towards the back of the results. But what if we swapped Fabio Quartararo with Brad Binder? Would KTM be leading the World Championship right now? Or is that bike just not capable of winning races in the way that the Yamaha is? Even if you had this peak form of Fabio Quartararo on it, would Brad's results on the Yamaha be worse than what he's getting now on the KTM? If you offered Remy Gardner the M1 right now, do you think he would take it? I mean, sure, look at Fabio, but would he then look across the garage at 2020 World Championship runner-up Franco Morbidelli and think, yeah, nah, maybe not? In fact, is the performance level of any of these bikes that different at all? Is the difference so small? We're talking like 1 or 2, 3% difference in the bikes, but the riders are actually making all the difference at the moment. Are we actually seeing at the moment, no matter what bike you're on, the best riders have been at the front and the worst have been at the back? I guess what I'm saying is I'm not actually sure what my answer is on this one. It used to be pretty easy to figure out the worst bikes from the best ones and the worst teams from the best ones and the worst riders from the best ones. But right now in MotoGP, with the unpredictability and the performance levels of the machines actually being that close, it's hard to really make sense of what's going on. Like most, I think I do suspect that the KTM is probably the worst bike to be on right now. But truthfully, I don't know. I second guess myself at every corner on this particular topic. How do you see it? Are there perspectives here that I'm not considering and I'm not seeing the full picture? What is the worst bike in MotoGP in 2022? I've got no idea. We'll see you on the next one. Take it easy.